What stirs in the void when the last prayer falls silent? What ancient judgment waits beyond the veil of mortal comprehension, patient as the grave, cold as the stars? Some claim they have heard it, a whisper trailing through 10,000 years of war, foretelling the moment when the angels descend and the galaxy itself forgets the meaning of mercy. Beneath a sky bruised with stormfire, the world of Caraxtal awaited its doom. The wind carried the metallic tang of ozone and burnt earth, the scent of wars fought generations before these present trenches were ever carved. Civilians huddled in cavernous ruins, listening to distant thunder that was not thunder at all, but the footfall of giants. They prayed to statues whose faces had long eroded, hoping these silent martyrs could shield them from the judgment approaching on adamantium wings. Somewhere above, lights flickered bright, falling divine. Not stars, not meteors. Shapes descending with deliberate grace, promising both salvation and the quiet extinguishing of all who opposed them. In the outer bastions, the planetary militia saw them first. Silhouettes carved against the flame-lit heavens, towering figures descending on pillars of fire. The soldiers felt awe-brief, radiant before fear drowned it. They whispered names usually spoken with reverence: angels, Astartes, the Emperor's perfect wrath. Yet something in their formation felt colder than legend. No oaths were declared, no heraldry shouted. Only the heavy, thunderous roar of impact as ceramite met earth. Dust washed over the fortifications like the exhale of a dying world. When it settled, the Space Marines stood motionless, silent as statues carved for war. And the militia knew, with the clarity of a blade across the throat, that whatever had drawn these warriors here was far beyond the scale of human suffering. Within the war-scarred cathedral of Hive Parathon, the local priesthood sensed the angels' arrival as a tremor in their bones. Candles guttered, stained glass cracked without touch. The confessor halted his litany mid-verse, for he suddenly understood the Emperor's judgment does not always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes like a knife slipped between ribs, quiet, precise, unavoidable. He stepped toward the altar and looked up at the mural depicting ancient victories of the Legiones Astartes. Yet today, those painted heroes felt less like saviors and more like executioners poised above a sinner's trembling neck. Outside, Vox sirens wailed.
Ow.
The sky rumbled again, and each vibration felt like a warning carved into the marrow of the faithful. The heretics entrenched in the ruined manufactorum complex felt no such reverence. They heard the thunder of drop pods and spat curses to dark gods who offered no answer. Their leader, once a governor now lost to rebellion and whispers, gripped a corrupted blade pulsing with hateful light. He knew the legends of angels in crimson armor, those whose purity was matched only by the brutality of their retribution. But myth had not prepared him for the pressure in the air, thick as coagulating blood as the Astartes approached. He rallied his followers with promises of demonic favor, but as the first bolter rounds screamed through the walls and tore men apart in red mist, his voice faltered. For the first time since he had broken faith, he felt something close to regret. The first shots were not a battle, they were a verdict. Bolter fire erupted with the violence of compacted suns, each explosive shell a miniature apocalypse. The angels advanced without haste, for haste implies uncertainty, and there was none in them. Each motion was absolute. Their crimson pauldrons bore the scars of 1,000 wars, their visors glowed with controlled fury, and their silence was heavier than the thunder of their guns. The manufactorum flooded with smoke and screams, the kind that burrow under the skin and live there forever. Astartes' blades, shimmering with ceramite teeth, carved through heretic lines like a reaper through an overripe field. And still, the angels did not speak. Their judgment required no words. As the battle raged, a lone scout from the militia ventured too near the ruins, unable to restrain the morbid gravity drawing him closer. He saw through a crack in the broken ferrocrete wall what no mortal mind was meant to witness, and Astartes kneeling beside the corpse of a fallen brother. The warrior's massive gauntlet hovered over the body, not touching, trembling in a way that contradicted all tales of posthumous uncertainty. For a moment of breath, a heartbeat the angel felt human. Then his helm turned sharply, as if sensing an unseen presence, and the scout fled, shaken by the realization that even gods of war knew sorrow, and that their grief was far more terrifying than their rage. Deep in the lower catacombs, where the governor's rebels had carved shrines to forbidden powers, something stirred. His shadows crawled unnaturally along the walls, trembling with anticipation. A ritual had been started, Hiraniant, corrupt, incomplete. The heretics had sought strength from the warp, unaware that such bargains always collect a price far steeper than promised. As the angels descended through the tunnels, their torches cast long, skeletal silhouettes behind them. One warrior paused before a gate marked with sigils that hissed like serpents upon exposure to pure light. He placed a gauntlet to the metal, and for an instant the symbols writhed violently before bursting into flame. Whatever they guarded had awakened. Whatever the heretics had summoned was already listening. Above, the battlefield quieted as the last pockets of resistance were silenced. Blood pooled in the cracks of the manufactorum floor, reflecting fire like a dark mirror. The angels stood among the dead, unbothered by the carnage, yet burdened by an unseen weight. Their leader, a figure draped in the authority of countless campaigns, surveyed the devastation with eyes hidden behind a skull-faced helm. He turned as the ground trembled beneath them, a deep vibration rolling through the manufactorum foundations. The warriors exchanged no words, but in their rigid stillness lay confirmation. Something below was shifting, something that defied the natural order. Their descent into the catacombs had not been an act of mercy but containment. In the deepest chamber, where the air tasted of rusted iron and old sins, the surviving heretic leader knelt beside a monolithic altar. Its corrupted blade lay upon it, pulsing like a heartbeat. He whispered frantic prayers, but his voice shook with the desperation of a condemned soul begging at the gallows. A rift shimmered above the altar, a tear in reality, slender as a hair yet vast as an ocean. Through it, a single whisper seeped, layered with countless others, not words, just hunger. The governor recoiled, realizing too late that what he had summoned would consume him first. Behind him, heavy footsteps approached. The angels had arrived, their presence instantly smothering the warp's breath like a candle pressed under iron. But the tear did not close. It widened. The final light flickered as the angels stepped into the chamber. Their weapons raised, their armor reflecting the churning distortion. The altar cracked, the rift pulsed. The shadows swelled unnaturally, forming shapes that were almost faces, almost claws, almost memories. The Astartes advanced, unwavering despite the impossibility unfolding before them. One spoke at last, a single word, heavy with centuries of duty and regret. And then, as the governor screamed, the chamber erupted with a sound like reality tearing itself open. Dust fell, the world above trembled. And somewhere within that expanding darkness, a truth was revealed, something the angels had feared, something the Imperium had buried. But in that moment, before all light was swallowed, the viewers would know only this. The angels had not descended to save Carax Delta. They had come to bury a secret the galaxy was never meant to see. Darkness breathed in the chamber's wounds long after the rift had snapped shut, leaving only the echo of that impossible scream. The angels moved through the settling dust in measured steps, their silence colder now, as if they feared to awaken whatever had clawed its way back into slumber. Above them, Caraxa trembled like a dying beast, crusted with the wounds of ages. The captain surveyed the broken altar, its stone now veined with blackened fractures. He recognized the pattern, not chaos script, not Xeno's glyph, something older, predating even the earliest crusades. He reached toward it, and for a single heartbeat the fracture pulsed in a cadence eerily similar to a living heartbeat. Even the giant withdrew his gauntlet. For in that trembling vein of stone beat a truth no warrior wished to recognize, truth that had nearly broken free. The angels had buried a secret tonight, but the ground beneath them still whispered its hunger. When they emerged into the manufactorum ruins, the smoke had thinned into a ghostly haze. The militia who had dared to remain stared at the Astartes not with reverence, but something sharper and ease tinged with the suspicion of men who had seen gods bleed. One young sergeant stepped forward to deliver a report, but his voice faltered as he noticed one of the angels' vambrace's cracked ichor seeping from beneath the armor. It was faint, dark, almost shimmering under the firelight. The sergeant swallowed. Astartes' blood was sacred, rarely spilled, fiercely guarded. Yet none of the giants moved to hide it. Instead, the captain's skull-helmed visage turned toward him with the slow inevitability of a falling guillotine. "You saw nothing," the The voice growled through speakers distorted by centuries. The sergeant nodded, but the command settled uneasily, a weight pressing on Faith already stretched thin across the horrors of the night. In the upper hive, the confessor felt the tremor through the cathedral floor. Carried like a shiver from the bones of the world, he halted mid-sermon, words dying on his tongue as the candles guttered again, this time, in a pattern he recognized only from forbidden archives. A triangle of flame, then a circle, then all extinguished at once. The congregation murmured, their fear rising like a tide. The confessor stepped back from the pulpit, clutching his rosarius with knuckles pale as bone. He tried to speak comfort, but the emperor's light felt distant, as though something unseen had drawn a curtain across the heavens. He turned toward the grand stained-glass mural angels descending upon heretics, but their faces were twisted now by fractured glass. Wings bent at wrong angles, eyes darkened. He blinked and the illusion vanished. But something had shifted. Faith itself trembled, fragile as cracked glass. In the militia barracks, whispers spread faster than orders. The scout who had seen grief in a god's visor tried to bury the memory, yet it gnawed at him. He replayed the moment like a forbidden vitriol, the giant kneeling, trembling over a fallen brother. Astartes were legend, breakable, unwavering. But what sorrow had made a demigod falter? The scout's bunkmates argued over it in hushed tones, torn between awe and fear. Some claimed the angels mourned the loss of their own, proof of their humanity. Others insisted sorrow was merely fuel for their greater wrath. But one veteran, old enough to have survived 3 uprisings, muttered a darker thought. Warriors don't tremble for their dead. They tremble when they fear what killed them. Silence fell. No one dared respond. For deep down, every soldier knew the truth. The angels had descended not merely for vengeance, but to prevent something far worse. Within the shattered governor's palace, the planetary council convened in a chamber dimly lit by emergency lumens. Their faces were drawn, pale under layers of ash and dust. Reports arrived in conflicting streams. The manufactorum was purged. The heretics slaughtered, yet seismic readings indicated an event beneath the ruins, a natural, rhythmic growing. The counselors argued, hands trembling over holoscreens, but no one dared name the possibility haunting them. Last, the interim governor woman, whose authority was as fragile as her composure, spoke the forbidden thought. Did the rebellion summon something? The words tasted like poison. The adepts exchanged terrified glances. No one had answers, only fear. Then a runner burst into the chamber, deathly pale. Madam Governor, he gasped. The Astartes request absolute authority over the planet, effective immediately. A suffocating silence followed. For if angels demanded control, it meant one thing. They believed the world could still fall. In the angels' temporary command bastion, Captain removed his helm with slow reverence, revealing a face carved from duty and exhaustion. Scars ran like pale rivers across his skin, each one a testament to wars unrecorded in Imperial archives. His apothecary approached, holding a cracked data slate recovered from the catacombs. The markings, the apothecary murmured, matched nothing in the librarium's sealed catalogs. Not chaos, not Xenos, something older. The captain studied the screen, the sigils pulsing faintly. For a fleeting moment, he recalled half-forgotten lore warnings spoken by dying Primarchs, prophecies carved into forbidden vaults at the edge of Imperium space. The apothecary hesitated before adding, "The stone reacted to your touch." The captain's jaw tightened. "Because it was not reacting to me," he whispered. It was recognizing something. The apothecary did not ask what. He feared the answer. Far below in the tunnels no angel had yet reached. A lone heretic survivor dragged herself through rubble, her mutated limbs trembling with every movement. She had witnessed the rift, had felt its hunger graze her soul, and, though she served dark gods, what she saw had terrified even the corruption within her veins. She crawled toward an ancient ventilation shaft, whispering a warning to no one but the darkness. It was not of the warp, she rasped. Not of the gods. It was, for them. Her blood smeared the floor, steaming like acid as she pushed onward. Shadows twisted along the walls, watching her, listening. Not demonic, not alive. Something in between. She clutched her head, screaming as a whisper brushed her mind. Not a voice, but a memory. Eyes widened. Whatever had nearly broken free was not summoned. It had been waiting. In the cathedral, the confessor knelt before the altar, long after his congregation had fled. The air felt colder, tasted metallic, as if the world exhaled rust. He opened a locked compartment beneath the altar, revealing a hidden relic, one he had sworn never to reveal except in the direst spiritual crisis. A scroll of flayed skin, inked in blood that had never dried. It spoke of angels descending upon a world not as saviors, but executioners tasked with sealing an ancient sin. The confessor's voice trembled as he traced the script. The prophecy matched the night's events too closely. He pushed away from the altar, breath ragged. "Emperor, preserve us," he whispered. "What have they come to bury?" His gaze drifted to the cracked mural. The angels' twisted faces seemed to watch him knowingly, as if they too feared what lay beneath the world. In the bastion's lowest chamber, the Astartes gathered around the relic fragments recovered from the ruined altar. The captain spoke softly, his voice heavy with the weight of truth spoken only in shadows. The heretics believed they were summoning power, he said, but they were pawns of something older, something the Imperium has forgotten, or chosen to forget. A younger sergeant, barely a century in service, dared to ask, "Then our purpose here? What is it truly?" The captain looked at him with ancient sorrow. Containment. The word tasted like ash. Before further questions could form, the Vox flickered to life with a desperate transmission. The governor's voice cracked with terror. "Astartes, the lower hive is collapsing. Something is moving beneath the planet." The angels exchanged grim, silent nods. The secret they had come to bury was waking, and it was hungry. As the angels prepared to deploy, an explosion rocked the hive spires brighter, deeper, more deliberate than any structural collapse. Vox channels erupted with chaos. Not seismic activity, not heretics, a detonation, a betrayal. The captain's eyes narrowed as the data streamed in. The Planetary Council had activated a hidden failsafe, attempting to destroy the tunnels and everything within them without Astartes' sanction. But their desperate gamble had failed. The blast had not sealed the depths. It opened them wider. From the newly formed chasm, a sound rose, not a roar, not a warped scream, but something worse. A chorus of voices layered like grinding stone, as if the planet itself were speaking after millennia of silence. Troopers fled. Priests fainted. The angels alone stood firm, though the tremor in their armor betrayed their dread. For in that abyssal voice, one truth became clear. Carax Delta was not dying, it was waking. And whatever it remembered would reshape the fate of every soul still clinging to its surface. The chasm breathed like a colossal wound, exhaling air so cold it burned the lungs. The angels stood at its rim, their crimson armor glinting in the unstable glow of tectonic fire. Beneath them, something stirred vast, patient, aware. The captain felt it press against his mind, not as a voice, but as a presence older than language, older than the Imperium's dreams of unity. He suppressed a shiver, not of fear, but recognition. The fissure widened with a groan that echoed through the hive like the cry of a vast beast rousing from its long, unwilling sleep. Above, the sky bled crimson from fires spreading across the spires. The planet was awakening, and the awakening was a judgment older than the Emperor's light. For the first time in centuries of service, the captain wondered if even angels could stand against a truth carved into the bones of a world. In the collapsing cathedral, the confessor clung to the shattered altar as tremors rippled through the sacred floor. The stained glass above exploded outward, raining shards of saints and martyrs upon the nave. Yet the confessor did not flinch. His eyes remained fixed on the scroll of skin he had unearthed, its script now moving subtly as though written by fingers still trapped in the past. He whispered a prayer, but the words felt thin, trembling, powerless. The Emperor's light felt distant, no, obscured. Not extinguished, but eclipsed by a presence rising from the planet itself. Memories of his childhood liturgies flickered through his mind, verses that spoke not only of salvation, but of warnings buried under centuries of doctrine. He realized that faith, when untested, is merely ritual. Tonight, faith was a blade, and he did not know which direction it would cut. The militia stationed near the lower hive stairwells heard the chorus first, a trembling note, low and resonant, vibrating through armor plates and into bone. Some soldiers recoiled, clutching their helmets as if to shield their minds from an unseen force. Others stared into the darkness with wide, hollow eyes, their lasguns trembling in their hands. Veteran sergeant knelt, whispering to himself, "Not prayers' names." Fellow soldiers lost in campaigns past, mentors turned to ash long before. The sound beneath them felt like those names being stirred, sifted through, remembered by something vast and ancient. The younger troopers begged him to stand, to lead them, but he only shook his head. "This world," he muttered, voice cracking, "has kept a ledger far older than our wars. We are intruders in its memory." Then the stairwell shuddered, and shapes began to climb shadows, moving in ways shadows should not. The angels advanced into the abyss with disciplined formation, their boots sinking into ash that seemed to pulse faintly beneath each step. The deeper they descended, the stranger the air became, thick with metallic tents, warm like exhaled breath, and threaded with faint luminescence. Strange stone formations jutted from the cavern walls like fossilized ribs of some impossible creature. The apothecary scanned them, helm lenses flickering. "These are not natural," he murmured. The captain did not respond. He was staring at markings carved into the stone spirals, intersecting with angular geometric shapes, the same patterns found on the fractured altar above. As he traced the lines with his gauntlet, the stone throbbed faintly, like a heart responding to touch. A whisper skittered across the back of his thoughts, not a word, but a memory not his own. He recoiled, realizing the truth. The world knew their presence. In the governor's palace, desperation erupted into political chaos. Officers shouted over collapsing holoscreens, data feeds bursting into static, seismic graphs spiking beyond their scales. The interim governor struggled to maintain composure, clutching a cold cup of recaf she had forgotten to drink. "If the Astartes cannot contain this," she muttered, "then our entire world is lost." Her advisor leaned forward, voice trembling. Perhaps the angels themselves triggered this event. She turned sharply, fury flashing through her exhaustion. "You dare imply betrayal?" But the word lingered in the stale air. Betrayal. Not by rebels, not by demons, by those sent to save them by the Imperium itself. A quiet horror settled into the room. If the Astartes were here not to protect, but to silence something, then the planet had already been condemned. The realization made the world feel suddenly smaller, as though the walls themselves pressed inward. In the deep tunnels, the surviving heretic woman staggered through an ancient corridor that seemed to grow narrower with every step. She clutched her head, blood streaming from her eyes. The whispers had grown louder, memories of cities untouched by human hands, of beings who walked in silence long before mankind claimed dominion among the stars. Visions tore through her mind, towering silhouettes suspended in liquid stasis, worlds reshaped like clay, in a terrible moment when the galaxy itself recoiled in fear. She saw the Emperor, yes, the Emperor standing before a sealed vault, his expression unreadable. Not fear, not hatred, recognition, she gasped, collapsing against the wall. He knew, she whispered. He knew what slept. Her corrupted faith crumbled beneath the weight of revelation. For the first time, she prayed not to her dark gods, but to anything listening. The confessor left the ruined cathedral and wandered into the streets, where firestorms cast the hive in hellish orange. Civilians scattered around him like drifting ash, their cries merging with distant gunfire, walked as if in a trance, clutching the scroll, its skin still warm. He passed a child sobbing beside her mother's body and knelt, offering a prayer he no longer believed. The child looked at him with hollow eyes. "Is the Emperor coming?" she asked. He tried to answer, but words failed. Instead, he saw visions blooming behind his eyelids, titanic silhouettes breaking through continents, angels descending with blades, not to protect humanity, but to silence truths too ancient to name. He trembled, for the Emperor's light did not waver. It brast as if preparing for something older than faith to rise and challenge it. In the abyss, the angels reached a cavern so vast it seemed to hold a sky of its own. A single monolithic structure dominated its center half, buried shaped like a colossal sarcophagus, carved with the same sigils seen above ground. The apothecary's breath caught. This predates human settlement, perhaps even the age of Terra. The captain stepped forward, placing a gauntlet upon the sarcophagus surface. The stone rippled like disturbed water. Shockwave tore through the cavern, illuminating the sigils in violent, pulsating light. A psychic scream blasted through their minds. Not malevolent, but mournful, ancient beyond grief. The captain staggered, visions tearing through him. A war older than chaos, entities that sculpted planets like marble, and a betrayal that shattered entire civilizations. He gasped as the realization dawned. This world was a prison. We are opening the cell. The militia above felt the world tilt beneath their feet. Buildings groaned and cracked, their foundations pulled by forces deeper than tectonics. The veterans screamed for retreat, but there was nowhere to run. The planet itself was shifting. A blinding column of light erupted from the chasm, tearing through hive spire steel and flesh alike. Within the light, faint silhouettes twisted, forming and unforming like echoes of beings remembering themselves. The troopers dropped their weapons, some sobbing, others muttering fragmented prayers. The youngest among them, the same scout who had witnessed an angel's grief, fell to his knees, tears streaking his soot-covered face. He understood nothing, yet he felt something. A message whispered into the marrow of the world, not despair, not doom. Something stranger, colder. Something waking, as the light spread across Karak's delta, touching cities, ruins, and catacombs alike. Every soul-faithful heretic angel felt the same revelation bloom within them. The Emperor had not come to silence this world. He had come once before to bury a rival not of faith but of creation. And now, beneath the trembling crust, that rival remembered its name. The planet's new heartbeat thundered through the fissure, a pulse so vast it seemed to shake the stars themselves. The angels braced as shockwaves rippled through the abyss, dust rising in trembling sheets. The captain felt his armor vibrate, felt the world remember its own forgotten power. He steadied himself, forcing breath into lungs engineered for war, but even enhanced flesh struggled against the pressure of awakening memory. In the rising glow, the monolithic sarcophagus cracked further, thin streams of radiance bleeding from its seams. He knew then that this was no mere prison, it was a tomb, and tombs did not open without purpose. His warriors looked to him not for reassurance, but for orders that might hold back the ancient tide. He offered neither. For the first time in centuries, he did not know whether to press forward or turn back. Duty demanded one. Instinct begged the other. Above, the hive spires moaned like wounded titans. Civilians stumbled through smoke-choked avenues, pulled between the instinct to flee and the crushing weight of inevitability. The confessor stood atop the cathedral ruins, robes whipping in the furnace winds, as he looked upon his dying world. The scroll of living skin curled in his hands, its symbols rearranging themselves with frantic urgency. He felt the Emperor's gaze, or imagined it pressing against his soul, demanding faith without understanding. But understanding had come. Terrible ancient understanding. He whispered a prayer that tasted of fear rather than devotion. Is this your test, or your shadow? May the words vanished into the howling storm. Below, people cried out for salvation, but the confessor had none to offer. All he had were doubts blooming through his heart like thorns, each one bearing the same question. What does faith mean on a world the Emperor once chose to bury rather than save? The governor's palace collapsed into panic. Officers scrambled to interpret impossible data. Alarms wailed in every corridor. And the interim governor leaned over a holographic map flickering with static and seismic ruptures. She felt leadership rot inside her like a dying organ. How long until we lose the hive? She demanded, but no one knew. The planet was moving beyond human comprehensions, shifting, groaning, breathing memories into the air like toxic spores. A tech adept screamed as the lights flickered crimson, only to reveal unfamiliar runes replacing Imperial system text. The governor watched them crawl across the screen like living scripture. Shut it down, she ordered, but the machine spirit only wailed in binary agony. For the first time, she felt the weight of a truth too vast for governance. She was not losing control of her planet. Her planet was reclaiming itself. She was little more than a trespasser. On the upper battlements, the militia endured the storm of light with clenched teeth and trembling resolve. Many fled, others froze. Few stood rigid with lasguns raised at nothing and everything. The young scout knelt behind a ruined wall, helmet pressed against his chest, whispering the only prayer he remembered from childhood. Not a litany of protection, but one of clarity. Let me see the truth, he murmured, and truth came. not whispered, not spoken felt. He saw the angels descending not as saviors, but as keepers of a secret older than humanity. He saw the Emperor sealing this world with solemn purpose, not wrath. And he saw the shape moving beneath the crust, vast, coiled, stirring like a sleeper roused too soon. Tears stung his eyes. He did not know if the revelation was blessing or curse, but he knew one thing. This awakening was not evil, it was remembrance. In the cavern depths, the angels reached the sarcophagus as another thunderous pulse rippled through the stone. Sigils blazed with blinding luminance, etching themselves into their visors. The apothecary stagged back, helm sparking. "Captain," he gasped, "these markings, they predate human psychic fields. They're reacting to our gene seed." The captain stiffened. Impossible. But the stone pulsed again, and the sigils shifted into shapes agonizingly familiar, winged figures. Armored giants. Something almost like Astartes, but not. Something older, more refined, more perfect. The captain's breath hitched. We were not the first. The cavern trembled violently, and a ghost-like silhouette flickered within the sarcophagus. Elongated, regal, sorrowful, beyond comprehension. The angels stepped back instinctively, not from fear, from reverence. They had not come to destroy a heretical threat. They had come to confront their own forgotten inheritance. In the tunnels above, the heretic woman dragged herself onward. Guided only by the pull of visions twisting through her mind, she heard the awakening like a symphony of mourning, harmonies layered across millennia. Her mutation burned, reacting violently to the psychic shift, as if the corruption within her was being rejected by the planet itself. She screamed, clutching her skull as the vision sharpened. Ancient architects shaping worlds with deliberate artistry, forging life, forging order. The Emperor learning from them, surpassing them, and finally imprisoning them when they refused to bow. She sobbed, understanding at last the cosmic scale of her insignificance. "We worship scraps of power," she cried. "We fight over crumbs." She dragged herself onto a ledge overlooking the abyss and gazed down at the awakening radiance. For once she felt no devotion to her dark gods. The confessor wandered through the mid-hive as it tore itself apart. Vox speakers blared broken hymns over screams, pick screens flashed between prayer and static, and each tremor cracked the world further open. He watched a mother shield her children with her own trembling body and felt something within him split. Not faith, its opposite. He dropped the scroll, letting it writhe on the ground like a living warning. He realized that his liturgies, his sermons, his devotional were nothing against truths written into stone before Scripture existed. He stumbled toward a crumbling shrine and fell to his knees. "Emperor," he whispered, "if you knew this world's secret, why leave us blind?" The shrine answered only with falling dust. And he understood then that faith was not a shield against revelation. Faith was the courage to remain standing after revelation shattered everything else. In the abyss, the angels stood as the sarcophagus cracked fully open. A radiant wind tore through the cavern, lifting dust, debris, and ancient shards of stone into spirals. The captain braced himself, jaw clenched as the psychic force washed through him. He saw visions not meant for mortal or post-human minds, creators shaping stars, forging warriors of impossible grace, a civil war among gods, and the Emperor walking away from a tomb sealed in grief rather than triumph. He gasped, falling to one knee. Around him, even the most stoic of his battle brothers staggered, overwhelmed. The shape inside the sarcophagus shifted, its eyes opening to burning orbs of memory and sorrow. It did not speak. It simply knew them. The captain trembled. He felt something break inside him. Not courage, not loyalty, certainty. Above, the hive city cracked as the awakening surged upward. Light speared through the streets, illuminating the faces of soldiers, civilians, and dying heretics alike. The young scout stood, transfixed, as shadows twisted into silhouettes of beings long forgotten. The air tasted of electricity and ancient sorrow. For a moment, time felt suspended, every heartbeat held in the grip of revelation. The scout whispered, "What are you?" But the answer came not from the light below. It came from the sky above. Imperial vessels burned through the atmosphere, engines howling with a wrath forged in secrecy. The Vox erupted with a single command, cold as a death sentence. exterminatus protocol authorized, and in that moment, every soul on Karak's Delta understood. The Imperium had not come to contain the awakening. They had come to silence it forever. The captain raised his eyes toward the trembling ceiling of the abyss as dust rained down like falling ash. The realization struck him with the force of a thunderbolt. The Emperor's silence had never been ignorance. It had been guilt. And now, the Imperium would purge an entire world to prevent one truth from reshaping the galaxy. The sarcophagus glow intensified, illuminating his armor in ghostly white. The ancient being within looked at him, not pleading, not commanding, simply waiting, expecting. The cavern roared as the first tremors of orbital fire shook the world. Time seemed to hold its breath. The captain had one choice left, one that would define not only his fate, but the fate of the Imperium itself. And in the final moment before the firestorm reached the planet's skin, he made it. The first thunder was not sound, but memory, echoing through every survivor who stood beneath the wounded sky. It carried the weight of all promises broken, all prayers unanswered, all sins committed in the Emperor's name. It rolled across the blasted valleys like a relic unburied, and the warriors below felt it in their marrow. The moment when fate begins to press its hand upon a world's throat. They looked to the heavens, to the smoke-drowned firmament tearing open with streaks of fire, and wondered if this was salvation or the final verdict. The air trembled with heat, the ground quivered with dread, and in that fragile pause between breaths and annihilation, even the angels themselves seemed unsure whether they had come to save or condemn. The descent began like scripture breaking. Red-armored giants plunged through the storm, retrothrusters screaming their fury into the wind. They hit the ground as if hurled by a god enraged, sinking into shattered stone, rising like living cathedrals bathed in dust. Their helms were scarred, their wings of jump packs wreathed in fire, their presence bending the battlefield around them. But something had changed since their last emergence. Their movements carried not just purpose but burden, the weight of a truth whispered only moments earlier in the void above. The rank-and-file soldiers felt it instantly. The angels were not whole. Something fractured within them, something bleeding behind their visors. And though they fought with the precision of legends, a tremor of doubt traveled in their shadows. Chaplain Eiffel descended last, landing on a rise overlooking the ruins. His Crozius glowed with crackling scripture light, yet the fire behind his eyes was dimmer than before. He surveyed the broken sprawl where civilians once prayed for deliverance, now silent save for the wind dragging ash into alleys like funeral shrouds. His Vox speed whispered fractured reports, missing squads, interference in the Voxnet, strange signatures rising beneath the cathedral grounds. But louder than all of this was the echo of Librarian Sevian's final warning before communion had shattered. A vision glimpsed only for a heartbeat, a whispered devouring thought. Eiffel felt it coiling still, like a serpent of light and sorrow. He clenched his gauntlet tighter around the Crozius and descended into the ruins, each footstep a vow against the nameless dread, circling the edges of his mind. The battle erupted with no herald, no order, only a scream that split stone and spine alike. From the fissures beneath the cathedral, shapes spilled into the open, shifting and unclean. Not demons, not Xenos. Something worse because it wore human silhouettes like tattered cloaks. Their faces flickered with half-formed expressions as though sculpted from anguish and memory rather than flesh. The guardsmen broke ranks, firing wildly as the things rushed forward in silent, shuddering motions, mouths opening like wounds to emit psychic static that clawed at thought. The angels charged, roaring litanies that shook dust from the rafters, blades igniting into arcs of holy retribution. But as bolter shells tore through the abominations, they dissolved into cascading fragments of light, memories, fears, echoes of the dead, reforming moments later with the cries of the lost. The battlefield became a graveyard of emotions made manifest. Brother Captain Asteron carved a path through the phantoms, each strike fueled by discipline and denial. Yet with every kill, he saw flashes behind his eyes. Brothers long dead, battles long spent, faces he had buried beneath centuries of duty. The specters whispered in their borrowed voices, begging him to remember truths he had sworn to forget. The captain staggered once, his blade lowering for a fraction of a second as the voice of his fallen mentor spoke his name. But the ground quaked, a tremor slicing the illusion apart, reminding him that hesitation was death. He crushed the apparition beneath his heel, firing point-blank into its skull as he roared for his squad to maintain formation. Still in the cold chambers of his superhuman heart, a question took root. What enemy can be slain if it is born from the souls of the faithful themselves? Beneath the cathedral, Techmarine Vortan labored against the shadows, gripping the ruins' foundations. His servo arms cut through debris, while his mechadendrites reached into shattered conduits, siphoning corrupted data screams from the machine spirits clinging to survival. The Auspex readings made no sense. Energy signatures that mapped onto no known warp pattern, frequency shifts resembling thought rather than matter. Worse, the planet's noospheric layer itself seemed infected, broadcasting ghost impressions of events that had never occurred. Vortan's lenses flickered as deeper layers unfolded like a wound beneath his feet. The catacombs were alive with psychic resonance, as though a colossal memory had been buried here long before the Imperium claimed the world. He tried to transmit his findings, but the Vox choked with static until a single phrase broke through, whispered in a voice that should not exist. We did not fall. We were erased. The whisper struck the angels above like a thunderbolt. Even hardened veterans faltered, their minds flicking to battles where entire companies vanished without explanation, always blamed on warp storms, on heresy, on the silent shame of failure. But here in the shadow of a dying cathedral, the voice said otherwise. Chaplain Afel felt the truth like a blade sliding beneath armor. This world had not merely been attacked. It had been silenced, its memories devoured, rewritten, twisted into weapons, wearing familiar faces. The phantoms surged again, growing sharper, louder, as though fed by the very act of remembering. The angels fought harder, but their confidence faltered as the creatures began taking forms far too precise, far too intimate. The dead spoke in perfect tones. The living saw their own faces staring back at them. Faith trembled. Reality thinned. And still, the creatures multiplied. Sister Censor Neva advanced through the broken cloisters, her sensors swinging in burning arcs, incense clouds hissing where they touched the spectral horrors. The relic she carried, a shard of an ancient saint's armor, glowed brighter with each abomination it repelled. But Neva felt the truth bleeding through her resolve. These were not simple warp manifestations. They were the psychic residue of an entire culture devoured in a single breath. She recited the litanies of severance, driving the shadows back, yet the ground pulsed beneath her boots like a heartbeat. She reached the central sanctum, where a ritual dais had cracked open to reveal a chamber below, and in the chamber, rows of ossified figures knelt in perfect stillness, their skulls fused with crystalline filaments that hummed like a choir of forgotten prayers. She sank to one knee, struck by the overwhelming sense that these were not victims, these were anchors. The revelation struck the angelic host as the battlefield warped around them. The phantoms' movements synchronized, their forms stabilizing, their voices merging into a single harmonic wail that shook the sky. They were not attacking, they were awakening. The ossified anchors beneath the sanctum thrummed, sending ripples through the air that bent light, memory, and will. The guardsmen fell to their knees, clutching their heads, thoughts fracturing under the psychic tidal wave. Even the angels staggered, their visions swimming with images not their own. Astron saw a world before the Imperium, its people praying to stars that answered in whispers. Iphael saw a civilization that bartered memory like coin. Vortan saw algorithms woven from dreams. And Neva saw the truth that froze her blood. The beings rising from the fissures were the planet's original guardians, locked in a war not of flesh but remembrance. A war the Imperium had unknowingly reignited. The storm reached its crescendo as the cathedral's spire collapsed inward, drawn into a vortex of shimmering impressions. The air tasted of copper and old sorrow. Iphael rallied the surviving angels, forming a protective ring around Neva as she held the relic aloft, light flickering against the psychic maelstrom. Astron barked orders, but half his squad heard only echoes of themselves. The spirits surged, condensing into a towering silhouette. Neither human nor alien, but an amalgam of every memory this world had ever birthed. Its gaze fell upon the angels, not with hatred, but recognition, as though it had seen them somewhere beyond time. With a voice made of 10,000 dying prayers, it spoke a single sentence that froze every warrior to the core. You are not our executioners, but our replacements. And with that truth unleashed into the trembling air, the world held its breath, waiting for what must come next. The colossal silhouette dissolved into a drifting lattice of fading light, as though the very idea of its existence had grown too heavy for the wounded world to bear. The battlefield fell still. Dust settled like old confessions returning to the earth. The sky dimmed to a muted bruise, its storms quieting into long, trembling sighs. Astron lowered his blade, the ceramide of his gauntlet trembling with the aftershock of truths no warrior should ever hear. The guardsmen rose slowly, as if climbing out of their own graves, the silence around them vast enough to swallow their thoughts. Iphael felt the echo of the entity's final words rooting itself deep within him, branching through memory like invasive scripture. Replacements. The notion gnawed at something sacred, suggesting the Imperium had inherited not a world, but a burden abandoned by those who had no choice but to disappear. Neva stepped forward, clutching the relic as its glow dwindled to a dim pulse. Her voice trembled with the effort of prayer, though she could not tell if she spoke to the Emperor or to the thousands whose memories had lingered too long. The fissures beneath the cathedral began to seal, stone knitting back together in slow, unnatural rhythms, as though the planet, exhausted by revelation, sought to bury its truths in the deep once more. Vorton recorded every tremor, every shift, though his data feeds were corrupted by phantom signatures, half-sung hymns, and impossible timestamps. The world had been rewritten again, and he suspected it would not be the last time. Even so, he pressed his hand to the ground in a rare gesture of respect, acknowledging the machine spirits that had endured the planet's ancient sorrow far longer than any mortal empire. The angels moved through the ruins in solemn procession, retrieving the fallen guardsmen and phantom alike, though the latter left no bodies, only impressions in the dust, like memories withdrawing from the world. Astron paused beside the remains of a shattered statue, once a depiction of some local saint, now decapitated by the resonant storm. He traced the break with his gauntlet, wondering whether any truth carved in stone could ever hope to survive the tides of history. These people had tried. They had anchored their entire civilization to memory, only for memory itself to betray them. "What chance do we have," he murmured, "when even truth is prey?" The wind offered no comfort, only the faint echo of his own reflection. As night fell, a quiet unlike any the angels had known settled across the world. No insects stirred. Distant artillery growled. Even the warp's ripples receded, leaving the planet suspended in a rare moment of unbroken stillness. Iphael lit a votive flame atop a broken altar, fire twisting in colors no natural element should possess, remnants of the psychic tempest that had torn the sky open earlier. The flame cast elongated shadows that bent like ancient figures in mourning. The chaplain closed his eyes, allowing the silence to wash over him. For the first time in centuries, he felt unsure whether the Emperor's light illuminated their path or obscured it. He whispered a single prayer, not for victory, but for understanding. A prayer he suspected no one would answer. Below the cathedral ruins, Orton continued his descent into the newly formed chamber where the ossified anchors once knelt. But now the chamber was empty, save for faint silhouettes burned into the walls, each shaped like a human once seated in eternal vigil. The crystalline filaments had dissolved into luminous dust that floated upward, drawn toward unseen currents. He reached out to touch one of the silhouettes. It disintegrated upon contact, leaving only warmth behind. He realized then that the anchors had not been prisoners but volunteers, individuals who had offered their identities to preserve their civilization's memories from oblivion. A sacrifice of self so complete, even death could not claim them fully. He wondered if the Imperium had anyone left willing to give so much, or if duty had become a shadow of what sacrifice once meant. Neva knelt beside the relic as its final flicker extinguished, leaving her surrounded by nothing but the ashes of a saint and the weight of an entire world's forgotten history. She felt no despair, only a solemn clarity. The warp echoes that had tormented the planet were not curses. They were warnings, reminders, echoes of a people who understood that truth must be preserved, even at unbearable cost. She pressed a hand to her heart, feeling the tremor of that realization. "We were not sent here to purge them," she whispered, "but to witness them." And though no one answered, she felt the faintest shift in the air, as though the planet acknowledged her words with weary gratitude. Asteron gathered the surviving angels atop the fractured causeway, overlooking the main valley. The horizon glowed faintly with residual warp light, illuminating the scars etched across the land like the lines of a forgotten chronicle. He addressed his brothers with a voice tempered by grief and revelation. "We came seeking heresy," he said, "but found only remembrance." The warriors remained silent, their helms reflecting the fading auroras. Some bowed their heads, others looked toward the heavens, as if searching for guidance among the stars, but none spoke. For how could they? What words could fit the enormity of what had unfolded, the exposure of a hidden conflict that transcended flesh and faith alike? As dawn broke, the planet exhaled a final shiver, releasing the last vestiges of the psychic storm into the pale sky. The angels prepared for extraction, though each step felt heavier, as though gravity itself mourned their departure. Fel lingered at the cathedral's entrance, leaning on his Crozius as he watched shards of stained glass glimmer in the newborn light. The images they once held, saints, battles, victories, were broken beyond repair. Yet in their shattered forms he saw something strangely true. Faith, like memory, was not meant to remain unbroken. It survived in fragments, illuminated by the courage to face what lay beyond certainty. When the Thunderhawk engines roared to life, their thunder rolled across the valley, stirring the dust of centuries. The civilians who had survived emerged slowly from hidden shelters, eyes wide with fear and awe as they watched the angels ascend. Astron paused at the ramp, taking one last look at the world below. It was no longer a battlefield, nor a shrine, nor a tomb. It was a reminder that even the Imperium, vast and unyielding, walked atop the graves of those who came before. He wondered what memories his own kind would leave behind when their chapter finally closed. Would they be remembered or erased? From orbit, the planet looked untouched, serene, its wounds hidden beneath clouds that drifted like pale relics. Fel recorded the final entry into the mission chronicle, his voice low and steady. "We leave this world not victorious, but humbled. We have seen the ghosts of history rise not in hatred, but in longing. Let this record stand as witness. Memory is as sacred as life, and just as easily lost." He paused, then added a final note, soft as a dying ember. "May the Emperor guide those who walk the line between what was and what must be." And as he closed the log, he whispered the question that would haunt him long after the stars swallowed the world behind them. What becomes of humanity when even its memories wage war? If this story moved you, like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments so the Chronicle may continue.